Ray County.
Welcome to this special edition COVID-19 Rogers Television program. My name is Carol Merton, and today I am delighted to welcome as a guest Chef Trevor Louie, who is going to be talking about Restaurant Canada and the impact of COVID-19 on the restaurant business. I want to thank you for being with us today. So if you don't mind, I'll call you Trevor. That's all right, unless you'd like.
Great.
Okay, and I understand that you're doing this interview parked in a car, in traffic, in Toronto. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's the story of, one being an entrepreneur, but also the challenge of trying to keep restaurants alive and dealing with supply chain issues and, all the things that have come to rise through the pandemic. And, it's not like it used to be, definitely from a perspective of business and also maintaining and running businesses.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and then a little bit about Restaurant Canada so that we get an idea of your involvement as well. So you are a chef and you mentioned an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so I do all things hospitality. So we have a couple of restaurants. We're actually in construction and building a new space in the city, which we hope that'll open in the next month. We closed one. One of our restaurants did not survive the pandemic. Another one has survived, although we're navigating that right now, coming out of the 5th lockdown for restaurants. I'm also a cookbook author, and we own an agency that represents chefs and all types of leadership around hospitality. But we also produce a lot of events. And so for the 5th or 6th year, partnering with Restaurants Canada on curating innovation in a pop-up restaurant that we're going to design for the show, that it's really about the reemergence, the renewal, and celebrating innovation that came out of COVID.
Excellent. So Restaurant Canada is an affiliation, an association of restaurants across Canada, basically. And have I got that right?
Yeah, so they are essentially our national association organization that's our lobbying body and representing restaurant businesses and suppliers from coast to coast.
So COVID-19 has had a huge impact, particularly on the restaurant business. And I'm wondering if you can talk about what you've observed as far as the difference between those that were able to, I don't know if you use the word pivot, but it's a common theme, and those who couldn't, and where we are at this point as we're moving towards opening up with restaurants. So maybe about how restaurants moved through COVID and what they had to do to change their model.
Well, let's talk about what's happened since the first lockdown. So we're talking about going back to 2020 in March when this first hit. We've had over 13,000 industry businesses close permanently. Over 70% of our restaurants are operating in a loss. And many of us believe that it'll take an upwards of, at the minimum, 18 months to get us back to pay off the debts that we've accumulated to try to survive the pandemic. You probably know this, Carol, is that our industry is already razor thin. So when you tack on things like supply chain, increase of shipping goods from all over the country or even exported, our labor shortages, a lot of people left the industry. And then you tack on the things like managing health protocols over and above what we're mandated to do as a restaurant already. So you tack all those things together, and truly it's almost near impossible to survive in this industry. We're an industry that's already debt heavy, and to take on things like loans or credit from banks is not the option that we're looking for. We need help. We represent a tremendous amount of economic value to all our communities. We are a huge contributor to our country's tax contribution, and we represent a lot of jobs. But the challenge is we've never really had a voice at the table to represent us properly on the government level, so that we're represented on a level where we feel that we can get the help and support we need to keep these restaurants going. Because, one thing, we don't really talk about is our restaurants and our hospitality spaces, whether they're the bakery or the coffee shops or the restaurants, is we are pillars of all our communities, right? So it's your favorite pizza joint, it's your favorite Chinese restaurant, it's your favorite place for a coffee where you get your bread. These places are closing fast, and they will continue to close probably for the next 12 months, in my opinion.
So in other words, we may not have seen the end of the closure, even though we're moving past COVID, there's still an impact to be felt on the restaurant business as we're moving forward. And there may be more that are lost because of it. I'm interested in your comment about community, because throughout COVID, we know that people being able to socialize and gather has been absolutely crucial for mental health and for well-being. And you mentioned the favorite bakery, the favorite coffee shop, the favorite restaurant. Restaurant businesses support community well-being by being gathering places. And I think as we recognize how absolutely critical that is for the mental health of individuals. I'm not sure that would have been so obvious before COVID. What would you say to that?
Well, I've always prescribed to the adage that every meal that we have is an opportunity to carve out a new story. And we carry these stories with us through our lives, right? Whether it's that familiar smell of a Sunday dish that you smell at a restaurant, where do we eat on our birthdays and anniversaries and after work, or to watch a game, or even death, right? We take for granted the opportunity to share a meal around a table. And granted, we've found silver linings to spend more time with family, but we still miss the normalcy of being outside in an environment that's not just the same around your couch at home in front of the TV. So yes, we need this in terms of ensuring that we can protect our mental health, but it's not just a perspective of gathering. It is the fact of getting our communities and our citizens back into the workplace that is consistent, right? And one of the things we don't talk about is for restaurant owners, and you could probably say the same about the health and beauty and the fitness industry, is you work 3 months, the plug gets pulled on you for a lockdown, you come back 3 months later, reopen it. It's like reopening a business all over again. We've had to do that 5 times. Right. Wow. And so an open and closure of a restaurant is not like flicking the lights on in a retail shop and selling socks. We have inventory, we have training, we have systems. There's just all these things. And every time we reopened, we had to deal with something new as well. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's remarkable that there are still businesses that are still able to function, although you say they're operating, and it's true, razor thin, like it's tough. For sure. Yeah.
Razor thin has always been the adage for the restaurant industry. A lot of people, and what we want people to know, and what Restaurants Canada is doing with, our campaign now, is we need our consumers to understand what it's like to operate a restaurant and what it is we deal with to get a plate of food onto someone's plate. The reality is when people say we're going to order takeout. Yeah, we love your takeout business, but the margins are really low. We went from a portion of our industry doing takeout to everyone doing takeout. So the compression of competition, particularly when you're in a highly dense urban area, meaning you can't sell food past a certain radius because you're just too far from everything else. And, there's 5 fried chicken joints on one block. So all these things added on. And like I said, the cost of goods that have gone up tremendously. Like we talk about things like, chickens doubled, and even things like oil, pre-COVID, we were paying $27 for a jib of oil. We're paying $47 now.
Yeah.
And so you think about just the basics of a basic ingredient like oil and paper goods. So it's been tough. It's been a tough go for a lot of people. And for those who have not had the access or the know-how to, like you use the word, I hate the word, but we have to use it as pivot, they were left behind.
Yeah.
They become victims.
So that leads to my question, how can the community support the restaurants? You mentioned, and a lot of places they've done a mixed model where, when they couldn't have people in, they did. Do you think that that's going to continue to have mixed models in restaurants? And how can the community support?
So if you take a look at where we were before COVID, if I had a customer that came once a week and they stopped coming before COVID, they've probably replaced that maybe with a takeout order once a week. And now they've started to come back a little bit. But let's think about what we lost over a 2-year period and what we're trying to make up. So the mixed model, I think, works because what some businesses have done, including ourselves, is we got into consumer packaged goods and at-home meals, like ready to heat, almost like a glorified TV dinner of sorts, right? We used to order Savern TV dinners and you popped them in the oven. What businesses have done now is find ways to make those really great dishes you would get in a restaurant easy to bake to take home, par frozen. And so there are different ways of doing this. Is yes, support your restaurant by going in and eating. We want to see your faces anyway. We want to chat with you. We want to laugh again, but take a meal home. So if we can get another meal in your rotation of 21 meals in a week, that's what we would love. If you're looking for a chili sauce or a spice, check if your restaurant has a packaged good that's doing it now. Like we have both of those. If the chef at a restaurant is selling a cookbook or virtual online or does catering, see if you can support them that way. So there's many different ways that we've sort of been accustomed in the last 2 years to pivot and become more creative with offerings. Talk to your vendors and talk to your local communities and see how you can support them.
That's a really good point. So to look at it as more than just sitting for a meal, that there's more to it and more that's potential for customers and also for the restaurants as well. The other word I've often heard, which may or may not be a favorite word, but sustainable. We want the restaurants to both survive, thrive, but be sustainable over time. So this up and down roller coaster is just unbelievable, really, for individuals.
Yeah, I mean, sustained economic impact is how we will continue to drive more jobs back to the industry. If there's one thing we realize is we had a lot of self-reflection time during COVID about how our industry needed to improve in itself. But we want people to want to be in this industry again, right? And by giving back to industries that need customers, that allows us to hire people back and give people permanent jobs again. It's really hard to come into an industry where you're new and you work for a couple months and then you get laid off because we're locked down again. We're hoping that the worst is behind us and now we can keep our best people working for a longer period of time.
Yes, because there is training to being to working in the industry. There's a lot of skills.
There's a tremendous amount of training. Another point that's overlooked, and I think the hospitality industry during COVID, was given sort of this wide brush to comment about. One of the things that was unspoken is the fact that our industry has traditionally always been mandated by public health. And so this is something on an everyday basis that we as operators have dealt with. The challenge is many of us feel, and I think even a lot of our consumers would feel that our industry was sort of like brushed with one big brush as potential super spreaders. And the challenge is, there really hasn't even been any quantifiable data because we, for the most part, majority of us are compliant, hardworking, to the book public health abiding businesses. And so to be casted as a business that was potentially dangerous to the community was something that we had to deal with, and we're still dealing with it now, right?
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask you about, because as things are being opened up, what would you say to people to let them have confidence and feel safe coming back to restaurants to dine? Because people are, they're sort of cautious at this point in time. I'm wondering what you would say to people so that they would understand about coming back and the safety behind that.
I think to contact their restaurants and just ask questions. Even though we have mandates that are lifting, it doesn't necessarily mean that all businesses are going to lift their mandates. So many restaurants are still on a wait and see mode in terms of whether or not they want to lift their passport mandate. And we'll see with the mask mandate on March 21st, that's going to change as well. What it does allow is it allows us to see less barriers to doing business eventually. But if you're someone who is still unsure about the safety of environment, contact your restaurant, ask them about what protocols they have in place, ask them about their public health record. We are on public record anyway, so when you're inspected by public health, you can actually go online and see how a business operates. But I do think it's important to communicate to your small businesses. If you've been there before and it's a place you love, pick up the phone and ask them. Drop by and say, hey, how are things? What's your capacity like? What are you doing to make me feel safe? I'll be honest, there hasn't been much that's changed. So even though you come into a restaurant and you have to wear a mask to go to your table, go to the washroom, once you're seated, you can remove your mask. So those things haven't changed. The only thing that'll change is whether you're masked between the door and your table, right? So I do respect and understand that this component of health and safety is different for every person and for every business, but we do also welcome, let's get off our phones and get off the internet and just have conversations to see how we can support each other so that I can welcome you back as a consumer and you feel welcome back in businesses again.
Exactly. And to do that, reaching out sounds absolutely critical. It also lets restaurants know that their community is still interested, wants to support them, and everyone has the same goal. Everyone wants to stay safe. So having that shared goal is critical. Staffing, you mentioned a bit earlier. And we know in various industries, staffing is a concern. Do you feel that it will perhaps delay the maximum opening of restaurants, the staff availability?
I mean, you've already seen, even now, even though most mandates and capacity limitations are lifted, many businesses are still only opening on a few days a week because we just don't have the capacity. So yes, I think it's going to be a continued issue. We need support from our government, definitely, on grants and supports, as well as support with encouraging people to come back into the workplace and making a safe environment for workplace, as well as supporting businesses to be able to recruit again. And then it's our job as business owners to convince them that this is an industry worthwhile in staying in, and we need to make it a welcome environment as well. But I think it's going to be a while. I can tell you just from a personal perspective, just with this last lockdown in December, our fifth lockdown, I lost 25% of my staff, and it's tiring to have to do it. And I lost my chef supervisor. So, it's tough to not just do it once or twice, but to do it 4 or 5 times, even if you lose 1 or 2 people. And so for some of us, we're still looking at, this time as an opportunity for growth, but we can't even grow because we don't have enough bodies to grow.
Yeah, and to bring new people on, there's always a big investment. When you bring new people on, you've got to invest in training them, getting them feeling comfortable, getting them used to. So it's always a front-ended cost to bring people in. Once they're used to the environment, that's a whole different ballgame. So losing and then having to retrain is hugely an impact.
Yeah, I mean, what we spend in training is a lot of time is unspoken and unseen. I mean, the fact that you can bring someone in and they work for you for 3 months and you train them, and then on the third month they decide they don't want to do it anymore, you've lost all that training. You got to do it all over again. And that's the part that I said about self-reflection and inflection in terms of our industry and understanding where we need to be, where we were and where we need to be as business owners. Our industry needs improvement, and that's on our industry and our businesses and our ownerships to look at making it a better place for employees in hospitality. That is not lost on many of us. And so we need to find ways, like you say, for people to come back and be in a sustained job.
Yeah, it benefits all of us, and certainly from job satisfaction, but also as a business owner, it would be important to have that kind of resource, human resource available. The supply chain and the impact on the food stock or the items that are prepared, what kind of an impact has that had? I mean, obviously prices have gone up, which affects bottom line and may actually impact, obviously, costing. But have you been able to get the products that you would need?
Listen, I'm doing this interview from my car for a reason, because of our challenges with the supply chain. And it's not that they're not trying, but they're only working as much as they are with their supply chain. And so part of the challenge, obviously, is we look at things like prices that have gone up is one thing. Access to product, because they're being held at borders, or the cost of shipping has gone up incrementally. And we're talking about basic commodities. We're not talking about things that are completely unique. It's not like we're asking for a special ingredient from a small town or a small oceanside city in Italy. We're talking about things as simple as chicken and cheese and ketchup and eggs. I've never done so much driving in my life in the last 2 years trying to find products to keep our business open, because number one, either our supply chain has run low or have run out of it, or they can't deliver at the frequency they used to deliver, right? So there's all these things that we need to deal with. And the fact that, most of us through the last few years as business owners had been able to develop, payment terms with our suppliers, whether it's 30-day credit or 15-day credit. Now it's it's COD, right?
Wow.
You pay for everything before it even lands. And sometimes you pay for stuff, the stuff doesn't come on time, or it comes partially, right? So you think of the compression of all these issues, and our industry. I don't want to just talk about our industry as restaurants as a whole. We need to talk about our suppliers who are going through the issues. We need to talk about our agricultural and our farmers who are going through the same issues. It is a 360 cycle that's being completely affected.
So you mentioned about having to pay up front. So before you even get to produce a meal or sell a meal, you have to have money to pay for that even before it's in front of a customer. So that's a very different approach. And
yes. Yeah. I mean, so Carol, you picture this. You have a 40-seat restaurant. You're open. And you're able to seat at full capacity. So you're going to purchase food and drink and hire and staff for a full week. Then a press conference shows up on a Friday and says, we're going into lockdown on a Monday. So what happens to everything? We have to pay our staff. We lose all our product because it gets thrown away or it's donated, and we lose all the business. And then you fast forward to how many weeks later where we get 24 or 48-hour notice that mandates are lifting, lockdowns are lifting, and we have to reopen. Like I said, it's not a flip of a switch. We now have to redo what we already did previously. And so this is not a knock on whether or not we did this for health and safety. We believe and agree in that. It's working with our levels of government to provide businesses enough support and notice so that we can adjust to this. Yeah. Right? These are the things that we're asking for. Is many of the times when we went through this, we were not given enough support or notice to make the shifts or changes to adapt to this.
Yeah. And earlier in the program, and I want to emphasize how important it is that people need to have increased knowledge about the restaurant industry and all that's involved. And certainly by you being here today, just acknowledging all of the challenges and all of those, I'll call them pinch points along the way that impact certainly the restaurant industry, without a doubt, is totally critical for people to be aware of, certainly as you move forward. What's going to happen, do you think, with the restaurant industry? We've just got a few minutes left in the program, 2 minutes left. What's next?
I think we will bounce back, but I think it's going to be a long road. We need our consumers, and you know, if I were to just draw out a really quick verbal diagram of how people need to understand what it's like to operate a restaurant, let's take a $10 piece of meat. Let's say a plate for $10. Something that we charge a customer $10. 25% goes to labor, if not higher. Let's just put it at 25. Let's say 30%, okay, at labor, 30% food cost because of the increase in price, okay? So we're already at 60%. Then you roll in rent, which represents somewhere around 20%. So now you're at 80%. And then you roll in things like taxes, maintenance, insurance, etc. There's another 10%, so you're up to 90. So on $10, I've got $1 left. I've got to find a way to protect that $1. So think of how much money it takes to make $100. I have to sell 100 of those to make 100, right? So the next time you go to a restaurant and you look down and you see, oh my gosh, the restaurant's charging for bread and butter. Think about what a brick of butter costs at the grocery store now. It's anywhere from $5 to $8 for a brick of butter, right? Yeah. A really good loaf of bread at a bakery is anywhere from, you know, $4 to $8. So wow. we cannot take on the burden of those products at our cost anymore, right? There's labor and time and cost of goods. So if our consumers understands this, I think they'll be more open to coming out and spending and opening up their wallet a little bit more and spending more money with us.
And you know, that in a nutshell presents the issue and how the community can support you. Our time is up. I have really enjoyed our conversation and certainly have learned more about the restaurant industry. I wish you all the best in your future. And, you know, we're here should you ever wish to speak again about this.
This program is brought to you by OHL Action Pack. Looking to see tomorrow's stars today? Follow the teams and players you want to watch. OHL Action Pack is part of the Rogers Super Sports Pack.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
Every year, dozens of Canadians are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railway tracks. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit stoptracktragedies.ca.
I am not a streamer. I am an entertainer that streams on Twitch. Let's get it right.
This is authenticity.
I don't think we could have imagined that chess influencers would